Yeah, that was pretty purposeful too.
Incredible. Incredible. Who's going to say no to that, right?
Well, I decided what my retirement date was 3 years before it was.
That is a brilliant recipe. Spend 7 minutes saying, why can't this be true?
Well, welcome to Climbing the Corporate Ladder Without Breaking a Heel. I'm your host and your coach, Dr. Cynthia. With over 30 years in the corporate world as a single mom, cancer survivor, and often the only woman in the C-suite, I understand the balancing act high-achieving women face. Now an executive coach and international speaker, my mission is to embolden every woman in the C-suite or on the rise to claim her agency and challenge the norms holding her back. Tailored for ambitious professional women, this show offers candid conversations with powerful business leaders sharing their real stories of success and failure. If you're ready to look up and step up, you're in the right place. Join us right now as we invest in your future today.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Climbing the Corporate Ladder Without Breaking a Heel. I'm your host and your coach, Dr. Cynthia. Today we have a really impressive guest with us, somebody I'm super excited to have. We have Gavriella Schuster. Gavriella is a visionary and mission-focused executive on leading-edge tech solutions and spent over 25 years with Microsoft. I'm really excited to dig into that further. She was a strategic business leader and looked at changing businesses and business models with extensive experience in sales, marketing, and product development. And now she helps companies continue to transform through tech. She's also a PE advisor and member of the board of Open Systems, Nerdio, Mimecast, and Included, and something we share a passion about. She is a fierce advocate for DEI and a founding sponsor of WIT Network and serves on boards of several DEI nonprofits. She's also a TEDx speaker, a host of her own podcast called The Big Idea, and author of an ebook and training on allies. So much to unpack. Gavriella, so good to have you.
Thank you for having me, Cynthia.
So I want to jump right in. One of the things that I spend a lot of time thinking about and talking about and coaching around is intentionality in career. And what we found in our research is that the vast majority of women in particular are not terribly intentional. But you are kind of an exception to that. You had an incredible career with Microsoft, 25 years, I believe. And you had 14 jobs or 14 different titles inside that time frame. Yeah. So I'd love to just hear, how did you approach your time at Microsoft, and how did you find your path through those different positions?
When I was in college, junior, my father, who had stayed at the same place for 28 years, lost his job.
Oh, wow.
And when that happened, he was completely devastated. His entire ego was tied to his job. And he had a really hard time picking himself back up and finding another job, because by that time he was incredibly specialized and kind of out of date, right? So I saw that happen, and I thought, I am not going to be like that. The world is changing. There is no loyalty.
Right.
And so I made the decision right then that I was going to make sure that I was constantly on the move, that I was going to build as much equity in myself as I was building in the companies that I worked for. And I wanted to be more of a generalist than a specialist. I didn't want to get 30 years into my career and be so specialized I couldn't get another job.
Sure.
And so it's funny, because at that time I was going to school to be a genetic engineer, which is highly specialized.
Yeah, I would say so.
And so I stepped out and I got a degree in anything I could. My credits would get me a degree in, which ended up being in psychology.
Interesting.
And
Okay.
and so I started in business, and so my path was that I was just going to learn as much as I could, and I was going to take out of every job learning, and as long as I was learning, then that job was an okay job until I wanted to go find the next one. So I didn't get like as intentional until I started at Microsoft. So I had like 4 roles at Cigna, then I had a couple roles at Aldis and Adobe, and then I started at Microsoft. And when I started at Microsoft, I was like, oh, this is a big company. And I see how I can learn a lot of different facets of this business. So now my goal is to learn as much about running this kind of business, running a technology company, as I can while I'm here. And if at any point in time they decide to lay me off, then I can go find another job where I can take all of that experience and with me. And so that's what I did. I started in global operations. That was at the time of outsourcing.
Right.
And I had done some of that at Adobe. And I moved from operations into training and certification, into global customer marketing, and then partner management. Then I did enterprise consulting. Then I went into licensing and pricing. Then I went to product management, and I did some mergers and acquisition work, and launched several big products like Windows Vista, Windows 7. And then I managed a $6.8 billion P&L in the United States around data center services, and started this tiny little incubation product called Azure. That was $10 million, and I grew it to $500 million. And then I moved into really reinvigorating and developing Microsoft's partner ecosystem around the cloud. And so over the course of those 25 years, I had 14, as you said, 14 different jobs. I crossed 6 different disciplines at Microsoft, and all the while my goal was I am going to learn a new area of the business.
So, there's so much to take from that and from your experience. And first of all, congratulations. Clearly, you have and continue to have such an incredible career journey. But it's so important that the woman listening hears the intentionality behind that. Because as I said earlier, in our research, which was global, we found that for the most part, because we are often conditioned to put our head down, work hard, and wait to get tapped, life kind of passes us by. And that conditioning also can limit us in terms of putting our aspirations into the universe, letting people know. So it's clear to me that you are obviously amazing at what you did, right? You're amazing at what you do. But how did you go about, from a real practical perspective, in terms of getting those opportunities, making it known that, you're going to do this with excellence, but there's more in you and you have the desire to do other things? How purposeful was that part of your work?
Yeah, that was pretty purposeful too. So to tell you a funny story, so my first job, as I mentioned, was with Cigna Health Insurance, big, insurance
Right.
company. And at the time when I started, I didn't even understand half of what they did. And after about 4.5 years is when I said, okay, I've had enough of this. I'm going to go into something called software, which in the late 80s was not very well known.
Right.
And my dad said, you're insane. You're insane. You could spend the next 30 years at Cigna. This is a great company. It'll be around, And I was like, well, this is exactly why I'm not staying there.
Yeah. Dad, do you remember what happened? Remember what happened to you?
And so the way that practically I did that was I would always look 2 jobs out. So not just at what do I want to do next, but what do I want to do in the next 2 jobs? Because if I looked 2 jobs out at what are the skills that I want to learn and the areas I want to go, then I would know, is the next job going to set me up for that one? Is it going to give me the network that I need? Is it going to give me the experiences that I need in order to get the next one? And so, I would map out, okay, if I start at the company here, these are all the places I could go. So basically I made a map of all of the different kinds of things I could do. And then each time I would say, okay, if I want to go here, like, so when I wanted to move from licensing and pricing into product management, right? And I knew eventually I also wanted to run a P&L. And so I was like, all right, everyone told me don't go from licensing into product management because you should probably do licensing to product marketing to product management. And I was like, yeah, but if I know I want to go to product management, I think I could get there now. Why would I put something in between? Right? And so with each of those, so with each of those moves, what I would do is I would decide when I was 6 to 12 months from being kind of at the end of the runway for a job I was in, right? So as soon as I started to get that feeling of, I think I've done this before, right? Yes. So that means I'm not really learning something new now. Right. Then I would start thinking about this and say, okay, if that's the team I want to go to, then who do I know there? Who have I worked with? And how do I reach out to them, right? And if I hadn't done anything with them yet, then I gave myself a project to do with them, right? So whether I could create it within the scope of my current job, and I did that sometimes, or give myself a stretch project where I would reach out to the leader of that team and say, I love what your team does, and I would like to learn more about it. I'd like to learn more about product management since I've never done it. Do you have a 4th, 5th, 6th priority that you don't really have anybody doing work on that I could do some work on as a stretch project for you?
Incredible. And how, who's going to say no to that, right? You get extra resources on something that needs to happen. It's probably only low on the priority list because of the matter of it's force ranked, and it's probably, really still something what they want done. You mentioned 3 things that I want to highlight back for the person listening and for the woman listening in particular. That notion of when I stopped feeling like I was learning, it's the whisper or the call that says, the starting to feel like rinse and repeat. And oftentimes, again, because if we're not looking up and looking forward, then the whisper becomes a soft knock, which becomes a doorbell, which becomes, a pounding. And we finally look up and it's like, wow, I wish I would have done something a lot sooner. And so you being aware of when is that starting to hit me, I think is such an important point. This idea that I hadn't thought about before. And I'm really struck by this idea of looking 2 jobs out. And so not just looking at what is my next, which I'm a proponent of, and which you did, but looking at it from the perspective of from a runway or a modeling and a mapping, right? You took agency around what so many people expect HR or the boss or the organization to do for them. Instead of saying, hey leader, hey boss, hey, HR, what is my career path? You said, I'm going to map this out. I want to get all this diversity of experience. I'm going to look 2 jobs ahead, which I think is brilliant. And then the third thing that I want to emphasize is this idea of knowing the people that can have an influence and having the relationships with those individuals, right? So have I worked with anybody in that segment or that department before? Can I leverage that relationship, let them know that I have a desire? And then on top of it, going really the extra mile by saying, is there a way I can insert myself that is value added? Do you have a priority? I'm interested in learning. It's not costing them anything. You're doing it as a stretch project. Once again, I hear so many people, having spent a lot of years in HR, that they look to somebody else to create those stretch assignments rather than find those stretch assignments. Look for those opportunities. You are literally the poster child for all things now and your next. And it's paid off dividends, which is incredible. How did that mindset continue to influence your career journey even after Microsoft?
Yeah, so I was just as intentional when I was making the decision to leave Microsoft. So I decided what my retirement date was 3 years before it was, right? I was like, okay, that's when I want to retire. So the first thing I did is I talked to a panel of people who had left Microsoft like in the last 2 years in like the last 6 months. And I talked to them about what were they doing and what was it like and how did they set themselves up and stuff like that, right? So I learned from them. Then I talked to a panel of people within the company who never said this to them, but I was thinking, you should leave, right? And I asked them why they were still there. What was the pull, right? And I will tell you, the most disappointing answer for most of them was, I don't know what else I would do.
100%. Not surprising me at all. Yeah.
And so I thought, okay, not going to be that person.
Exactly. You're a learner. You're a curious person. You would be bored out of your mind. Yeah.
So then I took like kind of the best of what these people were that had left that were doing things that I thought was fun. And I thought, okay, so now how do I build that path? And a lot of them were doing this, like advising PE firms, advising VCs or angel investors, or sitting on boards, that sort of a thing. And I thought, okay, well, I don't really know what that means. So I took a class at the University of Washington on sitting on a board. And I learned in that class that being on the board of directors was very much like the job that I had.
There you go.
It was sitting with your clients, listening to what they were doing, advising them on kind of how to look around corners, how to think about the competition, how to make investments in their business, how to think about using the technology differently. And I thought, oh, I kind of do that. I could do that.
Yes. Exactly.
Then in that class, what they told me was the steps to make that happen was 2 things. 1, start now because it takes 3 to 5 years to get on a board. And 2, I had to change the way I talked about my experience and make it more of this outside in from a board perspective thing. So I did that, and then I just started telling everyone that is what I wanted to do, and that I could start now because Microsoft would let me sit on one board while I was still at the company, and I could, and that I, later in a few years would want to be doing that more, right? And from that, actually, within 6 months, I got my first board position.
And I'm not at all surprised. And yet it's not easy. I mean, I have put into the universe, I sit on a nonprofit board that I absolutely love with Able Light. But I've, put into the universe that I would love to serve on a for-profit board and bring industry experience. And it takes forethought and it takes preparation and it takes putting that out there. So 6 months is fantastic, but it's evidence that the process paid off. And again, some of the things, and we cover so many of these elements that you did intuitively, we cover through our research in Now Near Next. And that is, you identified your next while still employed at Microsoft. In 3 years, I want to move into my encore, I would call it, right? In place of retirement. And because you clearly haven't retired, so so it definitely is an encore. But you identified it, and then you did the research to find out, well, what does that even look like? Because a lot of times the woman listening says, well, I don't even know what my next should be. So perhaps it's the woman listening that says, yeah, I would love to exit corporate or whatever their current situation, education, etc., in 2 years or 3 years or whatever. But they're not real clear what that looks like, other than I'm going to retire and whatever retirement is supposed to be. You went to the effort of saying, well, you don't just fall off a cliff. Something happens when you enter that. You don't go from 150 to 0 and, cliff dive. And I agree with you. I too know women and men who I've worked with, et cetera, over the years. And there are a handful that I think, why are they still there? And I know the answer. I know the answer without asking them, because I know them well enough that they know nothing else. Their whole identity is wrapped up in that job, as you mentioned for your father. I was on the phone with a girlfriend today earlier. We were reconnecting, catching up, and we were talking about some of this same things. And she's working still, and she says, at some point I want to retire. And I said, you need to be thinking today what that's going to look like, and what seeds are you planting today to ready yourself? And I mentioned the board. So you researched it, you took a class, so you started working on your future today. You said, I'm going to do my Microsoft job with excellence and start slowly working on what I know my next looks like 3 years from now, and then told people about it. I mean, put your aspirations into the universe so that you don't know where your name comes up in rooms you're not, right? And people aren't mind readers. So yeah, that is a brilliant recipe. And for the woman listening, that applies if you are in your dream job today and you're 30 years old. What is your next? And what are the seeds that you're going to plant? Start working on your future today while doing your day job with excellence. You have a lot of tenacity, and there's a couple places I want to go, but something I have in my notes from when we talked earlier, this idea about asking for what you want. And I want to harken back to earlier in your career when you had your daughter and son. There was a point where you really felt wanting to make a decision that you wanted to scale back for a period of time.
Yep.
And talk about, and by the way, way before this was popular, right? I mean, people are doing it more today, and it still has angst around it. You were doing this before part-time or any kind of thing was cool. So talk about that.
Yeah. So, when I had my first child, my daughter, there was disruption, but it wasn't like life-changing disruption, right? But when I had my son 3 years later, and I was home on maternity leave, and I thought, holy cow, nobody prepared me for this. Like, nobody prepared me for how much harder a second child was.
Right.
Because
it's like they multiply.
Yeah, right? Because you have this first one who's, all going busy all the time and wants your attention, is used to 100% of your attention. Yes. And suddenly you've got this other person you have to take care of. And I was home thinking, how in the heck am I ever going to fit full-time work back into this?
Mm-hmm. Right? Exactly.
And why? Because I love this, right? And so, I gave it a lot of thought, and I thought, well, part-time. I could do part-time. I could do like 3 days on, 4 days off. And that would feel good to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought I could arrange that because the person I had been reporting to, I'd been working for about 2 to 3 years. And I thought, well, he knows me well enough. He might, be willing to make this adjustment, at least for a period of time.
Sure.
Then horribleness happened, and he got a different job, and they brought in someone I didn't know.
It's like, oh man, missed that opportunity.
And I was like, oh no. And so while I was on leave, I got in contact with him, and I said, look, I know we don't know each other very well. I thought maybe it would be a good idea if we met up for lunch sometime before I came back. So we met for lunch, and I started to kind of feel him out for this idea, right? Like just things like, hey, do you know what I do? Do you know what my team does? Well, whatever. And so it was kind of clear that this was going to be an uphill battle, because he was like, yeah, I absolutely know what your team does. And like, I don't know how you get so much done with such a small team. And I'm thinking,
uh-oh. This isn't going in the right direction. Yeah.
So then a couple weeks before I was actually scheduled to come back, I put together a proposal of working part-time and like what would that look like and what would I do. And basically I did this. I had a framework that said, okay, what are the things that I do that are uniquely me? Like I have to do them. Mm-hmm. And then what are the things in my job that are like administrative or repetitive or easily trained to somebody else. Mm-hmm. And at that time, I didn't have it's not like I had an assistant or anything, right? It was just me running this team. And right. And so I made this list. I said, these are things I uniquely have to do. These are the things that I don't. And I said, I think that the things that I could have like maybe a temp do, I could have a temp do them for like 20 hours a week, and these things I could do for 30 hours a week, right? And I went into his office and I talked to him about it, and he looked at me like I was from another planet, right? And he was like, this is interesting, but no way. Absolutely not. Yeah. He is like,
this is unheard of. Yeah.
What your team does is too critical. The job's critical. There's nothing like this at Microsoft. I've actually never heard of anybody doing anything like this. I just don't see it happening. And I was like, ooh, okay, disappointing. So I went off and I kind of refined the proposal, and I tried to see if I could find any precedents for it or anything. I reached out to HR, and I did get someone in HR to say, like, if your boss agrees to it, you can do it, right?
Okay.
So I went back the second time with a refined proposal, and I said, this person said, if we agree, then we could do this at least for 6 months, right? And he said again, no, I'm not willing to go there. So, by this time I had actually come back, right? So I'd had to make accommodations to come back full time. And so I went off and scoured my network, and I found a job that I could do part-time. So I came back to him the third time, and I said, okay, here's the deal. I actually found a job that I could do part-time, and I am planning to go do that. But as I was planning to go do that, I kind of got heartsick because I love this job. And I think that I can do this job. So first of all, I think it'll take you at least 6 months to find someone else to do my job half as well as I do this job.
Good for you. Good for you.
Mm-hmm. Right? And so I propose that we try my plan for 6 months. And if at the end of 6 months it's not working, I will come back full time. And if it is working, you let me keep going.
Seems like a low risk proposition.
And so, yeah, he said, all right, let's give it a shot. And at the end of 6 months, I went back to him and I was like, okay, I'm doing my 6 month check-in. I want to know, can I keep doing this? And he was like, okay, I don't know what you're doing, but it's fine. Whatever.
Amazing. Amazing. I mean, and the thing is, ask the question. We put up so many barriers that we project. My daughter stayed out of the workforce for about 4 years, raising her two youngest, and just recently went back into the workforce outside of the home because clearly she had a more than full-time job at home. But I remember, so her oldest is 11, and I remember when she was starting to look at going back, externally into the workforce, she said, well, I have to find something that's remote, and I have to find something that I can work, 7 to 3, because I have to be able to pick up my son and do homework with him. And she had all these things. And she said, and she'd find some things that might be interesting, but she would want to put them out of, not entertain them because they didn't meet this criteria. And I said, honey, I get that. And I respect all the things you're saying. Alternatively, what if there was a really smart, A student, high school boy or girl that wanted to make some extra money tutoring, and that they could come over and spend time with, my grandson, help him with homework, so that by the time you got off of work, that was one less thing you had to do. And she said, oh gosh, I didn't think about that. And my point being, we so often think that we're the only person and we have to do it all, and we try to force all of it in, and then we put all of these arbitrary blocks and boundaries. I mean, it would have been very easy for you first to say, they've never done this in the history of Microsoft. This, in this day and age, back when you were doing this is unheard of. I'm going to have to suck it up, or leave my job that I really, really like and go do this other thing. Or have the courage to make the first ask and get turned down and call it a day. But you went back to the well 3 times, right? Revised the proposal, created a win-win. You created a business strategy that said, here's how this would work. Here's the value to you. So I think for the person listening, I just want to impress upon you that sometimes we are the ones that stand in our own way of what's possible. And just a quick plug, that's where I think my 7-minute pivot practice is so important. It's spend 7 minutes saying, why can't this be true? Mm-hmm. Or what would it take to make this true? What would it take to make this thing possible? Spend 7 minutes, and what's one thing you can do that day to remove that barrier, to move that forward. It's amazing when we give ourselves permission to go for it. And you were relentless, and clearly that's suited you through your career.
Yeah. And just something that you just said, I want to emphasize. So as my experience as a parent, I tutor, mentor a lot of people. And I always tell them when they're having their children, outsource as much as you can. Anything and everything. And like these days, there's even more than back when I had my kids, right? But like whether it's the yard work, the laundry, cleaning, tutoring your kids, getting the groceries, whatever it is, like in those years, maximize the time that you're spending as quality time with your family and not the chores.
I could not agree more. I actually talk about from a boundaries perspective that, make sure that you keep the stuff that you love that brings you joy, even if it doesn't matter to others. And you do the stuff that you love and matters to others, but delegate the rest of it, right? You don't have to do it all. I spoke to an amazing woman, Elizabeth Lawler, this week, and believe she's going to be on the podcast sometime in the May 26 timeframe. She's got a wonderful approach called Hand It Over, and it's based on, Gavriella, what you just said, which is we try to wear the cape and do all the things, and what are the things you can hand over, so that you can have that incredible, valuable time that isn't emptying the dishwasher, feeding the dog, or whatever the things. We were responsible for emptying the dishwasher, making the salad, and making the iced tea before my mom got home from work. That was our job. And I laugh because she says that she could remember pulling in the garage and hearing footsteps across the house because the garage went up and the dishwasher wasn't finished or the tea wasn't made, and we were scrambling to get it all done. But yeah, chores were definitely part of my upbringing, so I'm a fan. The other thing that you and I have really in common that I want to make sure that we get to is this your work around allies. And you did a TEDx on allies, and you have an ally framework. Where did that? I mean, you clearly had a lot of incredible people in your path, but where did the vision around allies and the work that you're doing there? Tell me a little bit about that.
So, I started down this path thinking we have to get more women in tech. Like, the numbers are terrible and they're going backwards. And there was some things that happened at Microsoft that made me wake up to, this is really not getting any better. And so I started down that path. And then I thought, well, what's going to really make a difference? Because there's so many places you could go, but what's really going to make a difference? And I thought, what's really going to make a difference is if we get the men involved in understanding what the issues are and doing something about it. Because if they don't, then it doesn't matter. I could coach and mentor and teach all the women these things, and still they would get into these jobs and have challenges with the people that are their bosses and their peers.
Right.
And so that was the first thing. Then the second thing was I thought, okay, what has helped me be successful? If I look back on my career, what is the difference maker? And I thought, it is the men that I could count on my, one hand, that I would call allies, that stepped in at critical moments. One of them is my boss, who I had to go back to 3 times, but he became one of my best allies after that, right?
Sure.
And so, it's these people who, in those moments that mattered, stepped up and supported me. And so I thought, I gotta teach people how to understand when are those moments that matter and how to step up. Because there are so many people, men and women, who they recognize that somebody might be struggling or was just shut down or just dismissed, but they just have no idea what to do.
Right.
And so they just don't do anything. And I liken that to when someone's being bullied, right? You've got to stand up. And so I just put together a simple framework on 6 things. Just remember these 6 things that you can do when you see something happening. You can advocate, you can listen, you can lift them up, you can include them, actively, intentionally work to include them. You can elevate them, elevate their position, elevate their standing, put a spotlight on them so that people see the great work they've done, and then you can sponsor them. And a lot of people jump to sponsorship, but sponsorship is the result of doing those first 5 things over and over again first.
Yes. Oh, I love those 6. I love those 6 steps. It parallels. After we released Now Near Next, Kimberly Rath and I, we did a lot of events to promote the book, and inevitably there would be a man or a handful of men in the audience. And we were really fortunate that they would sort of raise their hand and say, look, I love everything you're talking about in terms of empowering women and helping them take their agency back and be more intentional. How can I help? And so I did some research studying men that were that small group of the handful, found your handful and my handful and other people's handfuls. And I studied those men. my curiosity was, why don't more men in particular step up or stand up or say something? And it ranged in terms, but the biggest thing was they don't know how, right? So the biggest thing was, which you solve for, and here are the 6 ways that you can truly stand into allyship, followed by, I'm afraid I'll get it wrong. Right. So I don't know how, meaning it doesn't, I don't even know where to go with it. And then there were people that felt really compelled, but didn't want to say the wrong thing or get it wrong. And let's be honest, there's a bit of their own political
Capital
that is at risk, right? So if I say something, is this worth the political capital in this moment to say something? So we too, and we developed a companion guide, an allyship companion guide for Now Near Next, which addresses some of the why men maybe don't step up and some of the ways in which they can, that really complements your 6 steps. I love that. And you have something coming out in early November. Is that right? But talk about what you are getting ready to launch.
So I've had this allyship training, but I have decided to take it out of a kind of corporate LMS system and turn it into the world for free. So it will be available on my channel on YouTube. You can get to it through my LinkedIn or through my website, which is GavriellaSchuster.com. And it will actually give you the step-by-step. And it talks a lot about the things that you just talked about, right? Which is, how do I get the courage to step into this, right? What do I do if I get it wrong? And then, it really gives people a lot of the tools, because the whole thing is just about practice. Just practice. And the goal isn't to blame or shame anyone who might have just done something that made someone feel small. Right. That's not the goal. The goal is to help the person who might have just felt small feel big again. Yes. And so if you focus your effort on that and forget about whatever that other person just did or said, then you don't burn the political capital.
Right. Such great advice, and so important in so many industries, right? There's still so many industries that are predominantly male or predominantly male-led. Certainly tech is one of those, the STEM field in particular, but everywhere allyship is important, and women and men really standing in as allies, right? I think, one of the things I talk a lot about is women shining a light for other women. And so allyship is not necessarily based on,
gender.
your gender identity. It's based on being human and being a person that has a voice and can use that voice to make somebody else feel big again. I love the way you said that. That's awesome. So free online training, that's amazing. It'll be out in early November. We will have all of your socials and your .coms in the show notes. Leaving the audience with this, what is the one thing you would advise the woman listening to start doing, stop doing, and continue doing?
Okay, so here's the one thing that I would say start doing. Start prioritizing the things that matter to you, whatever they are, right? Don't put work in front of those things, whether that's having dinner with your family, going to work out, going to hear a lecture you love, a kid's game, whatever it is, those things that are important to you, prioritize those things. Because if you put work in front of any of those things, you are making a sacrifice that nobody else knows about. Nobody knows but you. And so you will never be recognized or rewarded for that sacrifice, because nobody knows and nobody cares.
Right.
And so when you put those things first, you learn to set your boundaries and you learn to say no, and it actually gives you better political capital where you are, right? So that's the first thing. Always do that.
Yes.
So that would be your start doing.
Yes.
Your stop doing would be stop playing low light reels in your head, right? I did this for a number of years, and then I flipped the switch and started playing highlight reels. So on my way home, I used to berate myself for every little thing I thought I didn't get done or didn't go well in the day. And I thought it was because I was learning from that.
Right.
And I had this conversation with someone and realized, no, I should be doing a highlight reel. So at the end of the day, I started doing highlight reels. Everything I did well, everything that went well today, the things I accomplished. And I will tell you, my mental health changed completely. Level of energy when I got home was completely different. And I think I actually started to perform better. So stop doing that.
That is brilliant.
And I would say for the continue to find those things that you love and make sure that you are adding things into your day that you love.
That is such sage advice. And I want to highlight I love your stop doing, and I have never heard it referred to as a low light reel. So that's brilliant. I love that. I just want to, for the woman listening that thinks sometimes, wow, these guests have these amazing careers and they've done these amazing things and they're a unicorn and that's not me, right? Is that we all face those things. And as recently as last week, I was on a client assignment and two things happened that I did that really bothered me. I called one of the people by the wrong name. It was one of those, like, there's a Kristen and there was a Christy, and I called the one woman by the wrong name. And I was mortified because it was pointed out to me. And then I had left some people off a data point. Originally it was intended, but the way it was set up, I had forgotten I had done that. And so it looked like it was completely an oversight. Right. Two things that happened. I've been doing this work for a very long time, but I will tell you, Gavriella, I was out of town for this. So I go back to my hotel room and we had a brilliant day. Wonderful things happened throughout the day. And I went back to my room and I beat myself up for about 15 minutes over, I can't believe I called, this important person by the wrong name. I can't believe that I did this, and just was really down on myself. And then I thought, you are doing the very thing that you coach women and men not to do daily. And I literally took that moment to spend some time and reflect on my highlight reel of the day, which was a really great timing because I was going to dinner with this client that night. And I could have gone feeling very, head between my legs, like, I'm not worthy. But the reality was that I was being my own worst critic. They were fine. And we had a lovely evening. But don't feel like when you find yourself in those moments that it's just you. I don't know that any of us ever reach a point in life where that goes away. It's about awareness, and it's about stopping that negative thought, putting a halt to it, and reframing into that highlight reel. So I really love you bringing that forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's about what you started with, right? It's about just being intentional every day.
Right.
Every day you have to remember you're going to be intentional today. You're not going to be reactive.
That's right. Gavriella, this was such an amazing conversation, and you have taught us so much. There's so many things, one that emphasize what we believe and our research talks about Now Near Next, but you put it in such a practical, actionable way. As we wrap up this edition of Climbing the Corporate Ladder Without Breaking a Heel, one of the things I want you to remember for the person listening is it doesn't mean that your next has to be with a different organization. Gavriella spent 25 years with the same company, but had 14 different positions because she was intentional. She was thinking ahead. She had her learner hat on. So for those of you listening, consider this. If you're intentional about your career, you're thinking ahead, start working on your future today. And that is a wrap for today. Thank you for the privilege of sharing a little bit of your time with us. We know your time is very precious. Congratulations on investing a small portion of your day with you and with us. Stay in touch. You can reach out to me at hello@cynthiabentzen-mercer.com. You can reach me on my website with free resources at www.cynthiabentzen-mercer.com. Pick up a copy of Now Near Next and pre-order Human Capital Investment Strategy on Amazon. And remember to grab a copy of Gavriella's free ally guide and information that'll be on her website. The information will be in the show notes. Until next time, if you loved this episode and it resonated, share with a friend and a loved one. Rate us on Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen. Drop a comment. And until the next time, boldly invest in your future today.
That concludes today's episode of Climbing the Corporate Ladder Without Breaking a Heel with me, your coach and host, Dr. Cynthia. Congratulations on choosing to invest in yourself. I know your time is precious, so thank you for spending a little bit of it with me. I believe in helping you step forward, look up, and realize your full potential. So if today's episode resonated with you, I'd be so grateful if you rate and comment on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you tuned in. And if you know someone who would benefit, please share this episode with them. Before you go, fuel your next step. Grab a copy of Now Near Next, or pre-order a copy of Human Capital Investment Strategy, both available online at Amazon. Let's stay connected. Visit me at cynthiabentzen-mercer.com or find me on all the social and follow me at Dr. Cynthia Bentzen-Mercer. Until next time, remember, boldly start working on your future today.